It's my pleasure to introduce the last session for the day, which is Anthony Climpson from the New Forest in England. I'll let him introduce himself and say a lot about what he's done, but I'll say a couple of things about him. I've known him for many years, so I'm really surprised that he agreed to come. Also, he is a guru in destination management planning. He was involved in the team that really put destination management planning on the map in help write the handbook for the English Tourism Council many years ago. And he, on behalf of New Forest, won the World Responsible Tourism Award, beating Costa Rica and Sri Lanka. So I will let him introduce himself and tell you more and give you the English side of the story. Anthony.
Thank you very much, Tom. I never thought in the whole of my life I'd ever hear Tom say anything complimentary about me, but I appreciate it. It's heartfelt. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you very much to Anna for inviting me here. I feel a bit of a fraud because I'm a sheep in wolf's clothing, if you understand the analogy. I love tourism. I fell in love with it when I was about 35. I was an aimless child. I never knew what I wanted to do. I loved history. I loved geography, and I was very troublesome apart from that at school. And when I was 35, suddenly, through a range of strange coincidences, fell in love with tourism as an idea because it brings people and places together, and places and people together. And it just seemed to me to be the perfect thing for me to commit my life to. And one of the things that I've done, which most of my colleagues in England haven't done, is I was lucky enough to get the best job in England, first up, well, second up actually, and I've held on to it for 30 years. And all my friends and colleagues have been moving on from destination, climbing the greasy pole of remote control, and I am happily still down and dirty with the people, doing the job at the grassroots. And I want to share a little bit today of some of my experiences. But the reason I say I think I'm a bit of a fraud is because I've just been introduced as Frank Zappa would say, a guru. And everything I'm going to talk about you've already heard today. Because there's nothing new in this story of how to be a good host. That has been going on for millennia. There's nothing new in making sure that we don't mess up the place we live in, because if we do, then we have nowhere to go. So that's common sense as well. So there are lots of really simple common sense things which I just would like to reflect on in telling you a very short story of the basic framework which we have created and evolved over 30 years of working together in the New Forest, a place which is not new. It's very, very old. It remains the only wilderness heathland in the whole of Northern Europe that was around 2,000 years ago, and it's still generally intact, but it's the only piece left. It is England's smallest national park, and it's a place I am completely and utterly in love with. And as someone said earlier, you know, if you're not in love with your destination, then get another job, is what I would say. So I think probably the easiest place to start is that the New Forest is certainly not new. A guy called William the Conqueror, who was a Viking descent, arrived from the north coast of France and invaded England. Harold, having repulsed the Danes in East Anglia, had to march all the way down to Hastings, and a sheer fluke of stupidity by half the English army meant that the Normans just about managed to conquer England. And when William had sorted the English out, he was sitting on his throne in Winchester, he cast his eyes across southern England and he looked for his Nova Foresta, his new hunting ground, and he found it where I work. And some people joke where I work is that I actually came over with William the Conqueror all those years ago, and I've been there ever since. But enough of the oldie jokes. What I would say is that I'm going to talk to you a bit about common sense, and this picture here is a very good example of common sense, and it's about living and learning about how to live in your place and the idea of the things you learn getting passed down from generation to generation, and quite often people don't know why these things have been handed down, except they work. And here are pigs eating the acorns, the green acorns that have dropped from the trees, the oak trees in the New Forest in the autumn. And one of the main features of the New Forest is that the agricultural quality is so poor that instead of growing crops, they've grown animals. So we have a lot of ponies, we have a lot of cattle. They're indigenous, they are a particular breed special to the New Forest, and they live out in the open. And there are no fences, there are plenty of roads, and we have all sorts of complex management systems in place, which I may or may not mention. But the most important thing in this particular story of common sense is that these green acorns are poisonous if consumed in numbers by the ponies and by the cattle. It gives them colic, their stomachs blow up, and they die. And very many years ago, many millennia ago, no one knows quite when, they worked out, the people who are living worked out that pigs love the acorns and it doesn't kill them. So one of the things William did when he created his new hunting area was the last thing he wanted to do was share his hunting ground with a load of ponies and cattle and pigs wandering around. So he made a deal, he created a law, and he said, you can graze your animals across the common land of the New Forest if, when I hunt, you put your animals, lock them up. And we'll create a range of laws. And one of the laws was that in the autumn, pigs are allowed out to eat the acorns, which poison the animals, and thereby avoid the animals dying. And that's called common sense. And it's been going on for many millennia. There are 6 laws, which I'm not going to go into because it's far too complicated, and I've already wasted far too much of my time already. But I just thought I would say that common sense isn't something we have today, it's just something that we have. And it's been around a long time, and I'm sure in Iceland there's a lot of common sense. And the whole deal that we have is that we've created a situation where my job is to create the idea that common sense should become common practice, that we should work together for common purpose, we should have a common network of relationships to create common benefit, and that common benefit will not only enhance the cultural and heritage values of the place we live, but it will also give us all a good living, and particularly the guests, a great experience. And that hospitality, the hosting idea, we have a little saying in the forest, host as visitor, visitor as host. And one of the big problems I fell into when I first arrived 30 years ago was that I discovered that the local attitude to tourism 30 years ago was like the bumper sticker legend, which read something like, give blood, kill a tourist. In other words, local people really don't like other people coming into their front garden, particularly if they perceive that in doing so they're going to clog up all of the roads, make it difficult to shop, and all the other things that they take for granted in their daily lives. I produced, and we've mentioned conflict all the way through today in a variety of forms. There's a variety of conflicts going on. And as a destination manager, it's my job to identify conflicts and to try and find a way of bringing people together to solve those conflicts. And when I first arrived and I saw this conflict, and we have a local colloquialism in the New Forest, and a visitor is a grockle. And it's a derogatory term to suggest that I'm a local person, I'm perfectly okay, but they're grockles and they're different to me and we don't like them. And this was a real problem because people were starting to get carried away with this. And so I wrote our very first public consultation document on tourism. I entitled Living with the Enemy? ? And that allowed us to allow people to say, yeah, I bloody hate visitors. And that is the first step in identifying the fact that there is a conflict going on, because I don't know, you're very straightforward people in Iceland. I like your straightforward openness. In England, we're not so open and we pretend everything is really good, but we then... And the conflict issue and the tourism issue had never really been fully addressed. And the other thing about the New Forest is it's a very beautiful, pretty place, and it's full of really lovely houses. And those lovely houses are being bought up by very wealthy people who are educated and have money, and they're forcing local people out, and they're then controlling the policies, and they're then creating a situation where people like me are patted on the head and told we don't want more visitors, we want less visitors, don't do your job, you sit in the corner and don't do anything in terms of promoting tourism. Well, we've made a little bit of a journey, and I'm going to just cover some of that journey. The New Forest is 300 square miles, about 90,000 hectares, I think, in your language. It's quite small. It's England's smallest national park, but it has a population half the size of Iceland. 175,000 or so people live there. It's sandwiched between two towns or cities, Bournemouth and Southampton, and it is in a 2-hour drive time of about 15 million people. We estimate we have about 13 million visitor days a year, and we estimate, and I'm not sure how much you know about English money, but we estimate that there is a direct income of £528 million created by tourism. That's £500 million, which in English terms is quite a lot of money. And it always surprises people. Tourism generates about 20% of all jobs, and it creates perhaps the only real opportunity for young people to stay living in the New Forest, because if they didn't, they wouldn't be able to afford to live there. So a lot of the common features that we were talking about are prevalent and happening in the New Forest. What does that mean? I don't know. Does it mean I've been talking too long and it won't work now?
No, it just doesn't carry on.
Okay, fair enough. I could just do... Right, well, whilst the technicians crack on, I will have a quick look at my notes. The main mechanism that we on? The main mechanism that... right. This is a very typical New Forest scene. There are about 5,000 wild ponies, but they're not really wild, they're owned by someone. And we also, interestingly, unlike all of the forests in Lord of the Rings and all of the other mythological stories, we are a forest with a coast. We don't have mountains, we have a couple of rivers, but we have 43 miles of coast. And this is a very famous part of the coastline, which has a lot of fossils and a lot of coastal erosion. We have lots of local food. For those of you that can spot it, there is the New Forest Mark brand. We have about 150 members of the New Forest Mark brand, and that is a traditional English breakfast. The only thing on that plate that is not coming from the New Forest is the orange and the glass jug and the crockery, but everything else, and the knives and forks, everything else on that photograph comes from the New Forest. We have some very traditional modes of transport, and we have some very modern modes of transport. And we were talking earlier about trying to create an interest in getting people out of their car. These are little Renault Twizzes, electric two-seater cars, and we developed a whole network of these in partnership with the business. We had charge points in restaurants and places we wanted the visitors to go. The only problem is last year the company went bankrupt because the idiot that was running the company was a really incompetent businessman, which is a great shame, but the idea was a good one, and we are hoping to do the same with the new generation of electric cars in the coming year. We also have a thing called the Brand New Forest. Those of you that have spotted my little badge, we have a thing called the Brand New Forest campaign, and I will explain a bit about that later, but it's a scheme to incentivize people to buy local, and only local businesses can be part of it. And if you have one of these cards, you can get your meal at 20%, etc., etc. And most of our hotels and most of our guest houses and holiday parks buy you these cards and give them to their guests to use during their stay so that they can take advantage. We are old, but we're also very new. These are the tree houses of a 5-red-star hotel called the Tooting Glen. They've won plenty of awards. They're quite magical. And I've just put it up there really to show off and say that we have some fancy accommodation as well as the more traditional stuff. I also like the idea of quotations, because there are very, very clever people who've been able to encapsulate in a few words a really important idea. And for a historical destination and a place like Iceland, it's really crucial we don't forget where we've come from. It's also crucial that we're not so preoccupied with the future that we forget to be here now, living in the present. But by living in the present, it's really also important that we don't plan for the future. And the whole idea of a destination management plan is to do all three of those things. And it's a very good way, I think, of just reminding ourselves why we need a destination management plan, because we need to do those things. So the model that we've developed slowly, and we've talked about this all day, is that there are really 4 key groupings of big interest in the whole idea of life, but particularly life when tourism is involved, because the social part of the traditional sustainable development triangle, socio-economic, environmental, we need a 4th component, and the reason we need a 4th component is because the social thing is split in 2. We have the people that live in the destination, we have the people that visit, and we've agreed through all sorts of ways that that relationship is a challenging one, and we need to see those groups of people differently, we need to manage differently, and the verb model used to be the VICE model, V-I-C-E, in the Destination Management Handbook. It was the VICE model, and that was a nice play on words because people said, we can't have VICE, and I said, rather like the PR story of the geopark, it's good to turn the negative stories around and use it. And when, I don't know whether this is the case in Iceland, but in England, there are 2 sorts of vice. There is the smutty, nasty stuff, and there is a piece of equipment that many men have in their garden shed. And it's a metal implement which you use to clamp on things that are very difficult to work on. So it was that vice that we liked, but like all good things, we had a rebrand, and it was really good to refresh this idea, mainly because people don't know they're in the industry. What's the industry? People don't know that they're in a community. What they do know is they're a resident, and they do know they're a business. So we rebranded it the verb model, and the nice thing about verb is in English, that is the description of words of action. Because all of this talk, I'm very good at talking. One of my hopeful skills is that I'm good at turning the words into action and helping others do so with me. So that, I think, we can all understand is a good idea. Can we agree on that? And this is a good idea. The common network, the common relationships, the common principles. All of these things you know. All of these things you're doing in one way or another yourself. And all I'm doing is playing them back to you on the basis that we've been trying to do these things for a long time, and we will continue to do that. Because every day is a different day, every day brings a new problem, every day brings a wearing out of something we did a long time ago which needs refreshing. Every day, everything changes, every day we need to reimagine, we need to reconsider, we need to reflect. The other thing that I think is really important, and again you've all touched on it, is that how we treat each other is a really, really important part of our lives. It's a particularly important part of the visitor experience, because if you're paying money for something and people don't treat you well, or they treat you with indifference, the likelihood is you're going to really feel quite hurt. You're also going to get quite angry, and today you can vent your spleen and your anger on your laptop, and you can write lots of horrible things. And although some people are stupid and write silly things, very cleverly crafted negative comments can be very destructive. And so it's really important that we avoid indifference. I quite like the love and hate analogy. I don't really do hate, but I do a lot of loving. The economics of visitor happiness. One of the things we talked about today is storytelling, and how we can get a simple set of ideas through in a simple story. And the economics of visitor happiness is a little story I've created which seeks to try and tell the story of how we need to deal with visitors in the business of making them, helping them have great visitor experiences by working together to provide all of the things that are important to allow them to do that. And this little storyline says really simple things that we know. We know if we tell people as much information as possible before they arrive, their expectations are usually quite sensible. And those expectations can be met by what you're doing on the ground in terms of welcoming them and caring for them and making them happier visitors. And if you do that, they tend to understand more and spend more money. And not only that, but they behave well. They don't fight you. They listen to your instructions. They will respond to your instructions in a responsible fashion. And that would make their overall experience better during their stay. And if they have that better stay, they're much more likely to respect and connect with the local cultural heritage, needs of the environment, residents and businesses, and therefore getting more from the place they are visiting. So their experience is enriched by that process. And then they will therefore not just invest in it financially, but they'll do it emotionally. And again, today we've spoken a lot about the emotional nature of a visit and how you need to get into the heads and the emotions of your visitors to touch them. And in touching them, their response to their visit will be heightened by a much larger degree than if you hadn't managed to get in there and touch them, or your colleagues or your businesses in creating that experience. And if you do all of that, they will meet your needs. There's a theme here, and the repetitive theme is to give is to receive. And in receiving you can give, and so that cycle, that virtuous cycle continues. And that creates really happy visitors. And they are not going to cost the local authority, the local municipality money, because they won't drop litter. They will make sure they don't drop litter. They will look after everything. But most importantly, they will tell everyone about it. And they will do so with a sense of passion, which is the sort of stuff that a great marketing plan sometimes can't deliver, even though you'll spend tens of thousands of pounds on it. So that's the economics of visitor happiness. And this is another little quote I like to remind myself of each day, because it's really dangerous when you become old. You think you know things. And one of the most important things about thinking you know things is to remind yourself endlessly that what you know is the size of a grain of sand on the beach of life. You know nothing. And that you did know, you've usually forgotten because you're getting old, so you need to remind yourself of it. And the most important thing to remind yourself of is you're never too old to learn, and that if you keep your mind open, you can actually have some sort of chance of making a contribution. And if there was a purpose in life, I haven't got a clue what it is, but the only sense that I can make of my life is that I can make a small contribution in some way, in a positive way, to what I do in my life. And I think most people probably, if they investigate their minds, will probably say the same thing. If we can make a small contribution, well, we're not going to do that if we have a closed mind. And my own country recently has been riddled with stupid decisions made by people who have really closed minds, and they are frustrated. And we won't go into that because you can tell already I'm getting passionate, so I'll move on. This is just a sort of structural framework that we use to just keep it simple. Tom mentioned earlier that all of this complex detailed research is all very good, but the thing I know about complex detailed research is no one ever does anything about it. And from a practical day-to-day level, the other thing I know is that the teams we work in are very small, and we only have a few of us who are capable of engendering any form of management, and therefore we need to keep the job simple, the ideas simple, and then we have a chance of doing things which will actually make a contribution and make a difference. And the first thing to do is understand that all of these businesses will all have a slightly different variation on what they need from you and from the destination, from your marketing, from your regulation, from your arrangements, from everything. So that's just a little structural thing. We have a New Forest Tourism Association, and these little arrows mean that they all work together, they all work separately, they all work on marketing, they all work to steer themselves. And that's just a little business structure which we operate in the New Forest. And up the top is the steering group, down the bottom is the marketing and the digital development groups. And again, what we do in marketing, we actually bring in people who are not in the tourism industry, but are marketing specialists. Because it's amazing how they can bring a fresh insight onto an old problem. And that's always very helpful. The other thing, as I mentioned, is you can get their expertise for nothing, because the reason they want to contribute is they live there and they want the thing to be done properly. Yeah? So they will give their time free of charge. And those experts would cost a fortune in the marketplace. We have 4 basic programs. We have a thing called Visitor Stewardship, which is based around the economics of visitor happiness. It's about getting them to own their experience and be responsible and engage, and through doing that have a much better experience. We also need to have businesses responding in a positive way to their environment and committing to looking after the place, because if they don't, then the residents will smell a rat and they will accuse the businesses of simply milking cultural heritage and the environment in a way which is not ethical. So it's really important that the industry plays its part in putting back into the environment, into the biodiversity, into the environmental management of the destination. And we do it in a number of ways. One big way is we raise about £100,000 a year to put into environmental projects that don't attract funding, like reflective collars for the ponies so that they can be seen at night on the road. And they've saved a lot of animal deaths, but no one's been funding it. So the businesses have been funding the reflective collars, and visitors feel very proud that they've contributed to this. It doesn't feel like a tax. It feels like a voluntary donation, and we call it the visitor gift scheme. We also have a brand new forest campaign. I've loosely mentioned it. It's a way of getting residents practically involved by playing their part in the process of supporting local businesses. There isn't really a business in the New Forest that isn't engaged in the economy of tourism in one way or another. It may be very small, it may be very big, but everyone is involved. And the other great thing, and this is hopefully true in Iceland, is that the majority of the businesses in the New Forest are actually owned locally, unlike the rest of England. And that means the income and the benefits are held in the community, and therefore the value of each pound spent is much, much higher than it would be in Bournemouth or London or some other place. And that is a really important feature because we don't yet have a mechanism for measuring this, but it's powerful. And then, as I mentioned, that in the marketing and product development side, the businesses provide great experiences and facilities, and they market appropriately. We don't do any marketing of the summer because we're full in the summer. We do an awful lot of marketing in the autumn and in the spring. Christmas is very busy in the New Forest, but we have weird periods in November where we now run a food festival in November, and that chimes with the Harvest Festival. At the end of the cycle of grow, we have a Harvest Festival, and then first in the early summer, we're now planning a seafood festival to clarion call the beginning of summer after Easter, which is another traditionally quiet period of the tourism season. This is the bird destination management model, and it's meant to signify that nothing stays still. It's a constant process of churning experience round through the structure. So you have your destination management and marketing, you have your visitor stewardship, your environmental stuff, your resident stuff, your business stuff. They feed down, they feed across, they feed in between. They go through research, quality training, planning, transport, technology, marketing. I wish I could say we did a lot here, but we do a bit. And that's enough to create an audit of what you're doing constantly and creating a plan and a strategy, identify who does what, have that little action plan, monitor performance, and then push it all the way around again. So it just keeps going round and round and round. And we've had this structure now in varying degrees of success for about 15 to 20 years. And that structure is possible for anyone to deliver. It doesn't cost any money. It's just about relationships, about common principles, common relationships, common activities and common outcomes. And slowly but surely, people become drawn to it as they learn that it's good for them to be involved. The biggest problem is residents. That is always going to be a big problem. So what I would say, and a few people have said it already, the destination and its management system is only as strong as its weakest link. Everything and everyone is connected. The economics of visitor happiness is the most effective form of marketing. If you do it properly, it will cost you very little. And if you get the common practice right, the benefits are completely free. Now, one little thing, we talked about logos. I feel I need to explain the New Forest logo. Purple is the colour of the heather that comes out in July and August in the forest, but it's also the royal colour of purple, and the New Forest is a royal forest. The graphic device here is taken from the Bayeux Tapestry, which celebrates William the Conqueror's invasion of England, and this so-called tree is actually a fern, and the forest is full of ferns, but it sort of looks like a really groovy tree, and we want to be very modern because we're very old. So I just thought I'd just give you a little bit of brand value there. on, I just want a couple of things. How am I doing on time, Alice? Pretty good, am I? Yeah. Okay. I just want to mention, sorry, we have an expression in England. Do you understand this? Is it worldwide? Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, that was rude. I'm tired and I'm emotional. We've been working with the Lake District and Cornwall, two very big rural destinations, to create a thing called fair booking. I'm just going to whip through this, but I just think it's worth sharing because the big enemy at the moment is globalization. Okay, and I don't care whether I'm an aging hippie. I hate it, and the reason I hate it is because it is nothing but bad. Because as soon as you get beyond the local, you become disconnected, and as soon as you become disconnected, you don't care. And the only thing you care about is making more money, it seems. I don't understand it myself. I've been in a low-paid job all my life, and I've been very happy. So I think I'm the lucky one, but nevertheless, it seems in my experience that people just want to make more and more money, and they don't give a shit how they do it once they go above a level. And that level is when you become disconnected with what's going on. Okay, we see it all of the time on the news programs. It's horrific, but we're disconnected. It's in another country. It doesn't matter. Well, the trouble with globalism is that we now have technology which allows people to control markets by the old-fashioned route of controlling distribution. Google, Expedia, you name it. We have 4 or 5 channels to market which are controlled by a very small group of people. And if we're not careful, the commission rates, Airbnb is a bit of a left field thing, but it's really the same thing. And the thing about that is it's taking the control out of local hands, and you, as businesses, as destinations, have to pay big commissions to be part of what's going on. And fair booking is an attempt to get visitors, particularly on their second visit, to remember not to book through these big agencies and book direct with the business, thereby creating their money, the money that they've earned and worked hard for, into the mouths and the hands and the hearts of the people who provide the experience. Not a load of investors sitting in some place in some big city who doesn't give a damn. If we believe the economics of visitor happiness, it's possible to persuade visitors that this is, thank you, this, is that 30? Yeah. God, blimey, oh, that's good. Well, you're in for it now, I can tell you. It's really important that we understand this issue, and I'm not saying we have any answers. What I'm saying is that this is an important issue. We have to find a way of making sure that the visitors' money goes to the businesses which create the experience. And we aren't carving 30% off for some group of people who have done nothing more than made a lot of money and taken control of a form of communication. That is completely wrong as far as I'm concerned. However, they exist, so there's no point in pretending that we can beat them. What we can do is provide an opportunity for visitors to make a choice and inform visitors of what's actually going on. Most visitors have no idea that the commission is being charged by Expedia, by Booking.com, by Hotel.com. They don't know this, and once they find out, they go, oh, I don't really like that very much. And maybe next time they'll book direct. So there we go. These are obvious things that's going on. I think it's now 65% of all bookings are being made through them, and they're starting to control the marketplace. We own the visitor experience. There is a way that we can fight back and create a network of arrangements. We have businesses who 5 years ago were saying to me, Tony, the big problem with you, mate, is you don't understand how to run a hotel. We need this. We have to play with this. And 5 years later, they're coming on to me and say, hey, Tony, I'm paying 20% of my income to a booking company. I now can't reinvest in my bedrooms because that's my profit. And this is now becoming a serious problem. So we are working with this, and it's a movement. I think someone mentioned movements, and I'd like to try and persuade you in Iceland to think about it and work with us. We've got people in Wales, a couple of people in Scotland. We've got some destinations. We want to dust this off and try again. So I mention it because you can incentivize it. You can get the best price online, and we have a thing that guarantees you the best price if you book direct. You can create added value, give a brand new forest card away with the booking, and save another 30 or 40 pounds on your visit, and use crowd marketing techniques to promote the story worldwide. That's a little thing. And now one of the most famous British guys, when he was observing the key features of destination management, Winston Churchill said a number of things about tourism. One of the really amusing things, because sometimes even though we're successful, we feel like it's a failure. Yeah? You ever had that feeling? Yeah, I get it quite a lot. And people like Tom think I'm successful. You know, so... okay. Other people do. Success consists of going from failure to failure without any loss of enthusiasm. I really like that. That just appeals to me because I'm a stupidly enthusiastic person who just keeps bouncing up again, bang, bounce, you know, and that is probably the most important quality for a destination management plan and its owners. And if you can all be bounce-upable and not get brought down and dragged down, you're going to be dragged down on depressing days. It just happens, you know, and you just get depressed and fed up and you wonder why the hell you're doing it. But the next day you think, you know what, actually, solve them. We're going to sort this out. And you bounce back up. So that's probably number one. And part of that is that whole idea. I often wonder, am I an optimistic pessimist or am I a pessimistic optimist? And I think I'm probably the latter. I think I'm someone who likes to work out what the worst can happen. And if I can live with the worst, then I'm really happy because then I go bang and I'll drive on through. So I think I'm a pessimistic optimist. But all of the things that anyone, Tom mentioned that we won the World Responsible Tourism Award in 2007. I don't do awards. They're a waste of time as far as I'm concerned. And I didn't want to do it. But the leader of the council wanted to take £70,000 out of my budget. And I know it's a budget word, but this is not about money in that sense. This is about using your brains and common sense. And so one of the hoteliers said to me, why don't you apply for the World Responsible Tourism Award? You know, we're good at this stuff. Why don't you apply for it? We got long-listed, then we got short-listed, and then we won. We beat Costa Rica and Sri Lanka, who'd spent millions of pounds on their sustainable development programs. We spent next to nothing on ours, and we won. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons we won. The really good thing is, guess what didn't happen to my budget? So, all of the things, if I've had success, they've nearly always come out of adversity. A lovely expression is necessity, no, I can't get it right. What's the mother of invention? Necessity is the mother of invention. In other words, if you're in the shit, you need to dig yourself out. And we find ourselves constantly in the shit, don't we, as destination managers, so one form or another. And the real trick with that bounce-up ability is to be optimistic and positive and passionate. And that means that attitude is a little thing that makes a very, very, very big difference. Now, I could waffle on forever, as you probably gathered, and I found my second wind. One of the things that, how long have I got, Anna? 10 minutes? Did you say 17? Okay, I get it, yeah, okay. In all seriousness, I want to try and think of a few things, and you can ask me questions to help stimulate me. But we have, over the years, and I don't mean, this sounds very arrogant, I don't mean it to be arrogant, but I've probably forgotten more problems than I've ever solved, if do you understand what I mean by that? Because I've been around a long time and we've had little challenges, and we have foot and mouth disease. I don't know if anyone remembers that. Well, they actually closed the New Forest when we had foot and mouth disease. We had barriers saying don't come in. And all of our business then had no businesses. Overnight they just went through. We've had lots of challenges and lots of interesting things. We had, I was telling Tom just now, we had the Forestry Commission. When they first put enclosures around the trees, the people that ran the animals didn't like that. They set fire to the trees. So we've had lots of conflict in the forest over the years. It's a very interesting place. What I would say is my most important learning point, and I have a little list of these learning points, but before I mention them, I also ought to mention that I've worked for New Forest District Council for 30 years, nearly 30 years, 29 years and 7 months, although I'm not counting. And at the end of this month, I am liberated. I am not retiring. I am being made redundant because the council no longer can afford to fund tourism. And before they did that, the reason they're saying that is because I made an offer to them a year ago. that if I set up a community interest company to run tourism, take the legacy onwards, engage the community in it, we could do what I think is the most important thing that I've learned about tourism and destination management. And that is, it should never be just a public thing. It should never be just a private thing. It should be a community thing. It should be owned by the community. And destination management should be run by the community. And we are establishing a not-for-profit community interest company called Go New Forest. And the reason for that is the council in their esteem have managed to register brand new forest and control it, which means I thought, well, if we had Go New Forest, not many people would really notice the difference, would they? We can just simply switch. So Go New Forest is also Go, and then it's Go New Forest, and it's also, yeah, sorry, that's really cool, but I tried to be a rah-rah girl. And it's also about having another third way for brand new forest without the council being able to own the brand of brand new forest. So I just thought I'd mention that because I am suddenly reborn. I am suddenly... yeah, it's a very worrying thought. Well, if Tom is concerned, just imagine what my stakeholders are feeling. People who've lived and worked with me. I actually now work with many of the sons and daughters of the founder members of the original structure. And do you know the wonderful thing about that? Is they believe me. And the reason they believe me is because their parents, when they were kids, I met them when they were little kids. And the one thing we do is we trust our parents, well, most of us do at least, ultimately. And I joke, but I'm serious. The thing about longevity, everyone has mentioned that it takes a long time. Well, it does, but the one thing is if you can keep going for a long time, the trust and commitment that you can achieve. I often go to committees, and sitting on the committees and planning committee or something as a guy I know doesn't like me. I know they don't like me. But the one thing they cannot challenge is my commitment to the place. Right? And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether they like me. What matters is whether people believe me. And the only thing you can do in terms of getting people to believe you is be around a long time and try and get it right as much as you can. But most importantly, own and believe in the place as much as anybody. And if you can do that, you can be persuasive. And that is the other key feature of the whole thing. Now I'm going to shut up. Thank you very much. Anyone got any thoughts, questions? Anything I can help with? Or do you just want me to go to the airport and never darken the doors again?
In the beginning, you spoke about teaching the guests how to sort of own the place themselves. Can you tell us about how you went about it?
Yeah, we started a long time ago, and it's been mentioned today, and we talked about it last night. If you can explain why, people talked about parking and not dropping the... If you can explain that if you drop litter, the animals eat the litter and it damages the animals, people go, oh, I don't want to drop litter. It's an incentive. So in terms of the visitor steward scheme, mostly it's explaining things about why you should do things, why you shouldn't do things. We have a speed limit. I haven't mentioned the number of the regulatory activities that we have, but I am the only person still alive who created the first non-urban speed limit in the whole of the UK. Non-urban, so country speed limit, in an open space where there's no speed limit normally. And we put a 40, it's too fast, 40 miles an hour, should be 30, but a 40 mile an hour speed limit. We have cattle grids to stop the animals going out of the national park. Well, anyway, we'll call it national park. And we have speed limit around the area where the animals are because there are no fences. So they just walk across the road. And the New Forest ponies are smart. They see a car coming, they go, then they stand at the middle of the road and go like that. So you need to explain why things are as they are. And if you get businesses to tell them, we just closed the Visitor Information Centre. And the reason we've closed it is because out of all of the money we spend, it is the least effective way of spending money. But more importantly, the reason I believe in it is that our Visitor Information Centre is our residents, our businesses, and their staff. And they should be telling the stories about the forest. So if you get that consistent range of storytelling going on, then visitors will understand more about the place, and they will respond to that in a way which sometimes makes you cry, in terms of the belief that visitors have in the fact that they're doing the right thing. So in that sense, it's a fairly lengthy game, and you have to be very consistent about the storytelling, and you have to work very hard with the skills and the development of your businesses and their staff. Yeah, we have regular meetings. The group I mentioned there, all of those groups meet once a month. We're probably going to extend them to once every 2 months, because once a month's a bit much. They come together in groups. They have representatives for marketing. So each group has a representative for marketing. So all of the types of businesses. We also have geographic representation from the geography of the place, so that no areas are left out, the towns and villages. And it is founded on the principle of trying to involve as many people as possible. The only group we try not to involve are politicians and the municipality offices, because they are usually so preoccupied with their own regulations, they just get in the way. But of course, this is for your ears. I wouldn't say that in my hometown, but we have, obviously, that was a joke, sorry. We do have to involve them. But they do tend to get in the way because they have their own thing, going on, and it's not really necessarily the same thing as everyone. So the answer to your question is by regular contact, regular communication, regular meetings, a structure which allows everyone to participate, and most important of all, creating and engendering the idea that anyone can say anything at any time about anything, and letting it happen, and not trying to shut people up. Because it's amazing how often someone says something really bad and really negative, but the end result is that everyone becomes incredibly positive because we've taught the negative stuff out and we've come up with a positive answer. But the tendency for all of us is to be defensive. Don't talk about that. Don't talk about the war. That sort of stuff, which is really not helpful, but it takes courage. So on my little list, which I'm just going to quickly mention before Anna tells me to shut up, you have a quick point?
You sort of answered it. I was just thinking of the touch points if you're close. If all your visitors have some touch point with the information you want to give them, and give them that feeling of caring for the event.
Yeah, I'd love to say we have it sorted out perfectly.
It sounds very romantic.
Yeah, it is. And I'm a very romantic person. But the truth is we don't have it completely sorted out. But the reason we've done it this way round is that there was a political issue which we had to deal with. And we didn't want to fight the political issue because there were political solutions attached to that issue that we didn't want to make a fuss about. But now that it's happened, one thing that was really interesting is that not one business complained about us closing the visitor. Not one business complained. And the reason not one business complained is they understood what was happening, and they valued, because of the relationships we've just been talking about, the regular meetings, they understood what was going on. And they now have no option but to accept the responsibility of filling the gap. And that is another way of trying to manipulate. Someone said to me, how do you describe your job? What do you actually do, Tony? And I would say I'm a facilitator. Right? I facilitate until I then fall back and manipulate. Okay? Because ultimately you have to. And I'm a control freak. Absolutely, and I'm righteous, and I'm a pain in the ass. But the point about it is if you're open, and I hope I'm as open as I can be, but I'm sure I can be better, you do have to accept people saying, you know what, Tony, you got this wrong, right? Or, much more importantly and much better, is that I am simply the mouthpiece of everyone else. And we collectively agree things, and I just happen to be the bloke that says them. And that's the teamwork that we're talking about, because a lot of businesses don't want to say certain things because it will affect their business, their reputation, they will fall out with someone. Whereas I need to be liberated and have the commitment as a destination manager to feel righteous that I can say it because it's important that someone says it. Yeah? And it's my job to. So, and I don't know where we got there, but I think what I was trying to say is it's important to have courage, it's important to believe, it's important to challenge, and I've got a whole list of them. Tom mentioned fun. One of the things I really find challenging, especially all of that strategy stuff at Visit England, so boring. And it was so hard work, and it wasn't remotely about fun. Well, if you've got a plan which isn't about fun, what's going to happen to the visitor? It's not going to be fun, is it? And actually, apart from feeling better, well-being, spiritual refreshment, renewal, nature, all of those things, people want to have fun. People want to have something different to what they've currently got in their lives. And that's why they travel. So fun, co-opetition, the idea of collaboration and competition. Collaboration to create economies of scale so you can do things that you couldn't do on your own. But competition, and that'll drive up standards. Hotel group lunches in the New Forest are wonderful. Because each lunch, the hotel wants to do a better lunch than the previous hotel. They're great lunches. And that is co-opetition. The fact that you're not actually competing amongst yourselves. Iceland is competing with the rest of the world, right? And within Iceland, you should all collaborate. You should compete because it's healthy and it drives up standards. But by collaborating, you learn from each other. And you can all share the win. You can all share the improvement. And your standards will go up and up. In the New Forest, when we first started, we had one five-star hotel and a bunch of campsites. We now have 2 5-star hotels, 3 4-star hotels, loads of high-quality 3-star hotels. All of the other businesses are minimum of 3, 4 or 5 stars across the piece. They're not necessarily expensive, but the New Forest is not cheap. But the one thing that's important is the standards have risen beyond all measure. And honestly, 30 years ago, the New Forest was crappy, really. You know, anyway, I'm starting to ramble. So, co-opetition, collaboration, steal other people's ideas. I'm going to steal lots of things I heard today from you, okay, because there are good things everywhere. Innovation is about keeping your eyes and your mind open and then joining up the dots. In other words, it costs a lot of money to completely revolutionize something, but if you just steal ideas, you can do it very cheaply and you haven't got any cost in terms of investment. Adaptation and evolution, not revolution. Don't change things massively. That's always really dangerous. Evolve and change. And long-term collective leadership. You need long-term collective leadership. Trust. Avoid disconnection. It takes a long time. Tourism has got to be part of the wider economy. If you, I would just waffle. And at the end of the day, the difference between stumbling blocks and stepping stones is how you choose to use them. Thank you very much.
Actually, before we go, can I just ask one thing that I think might be useful, particularly because there's some parallels here. Can you just say a word about how you manage the congestion in the New Forest?
We have approximately 30 minutes left.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd love to say we manage congestion. It would be really great if I could stand here and say we manage congestion. To an extent, we do. There are 2 ways that you can. We've had a lot of different traffic calming, I think is the phrase we use in England. Traffic calming and attempts to decongest. The biggest problem in the New Forest is we have an ancient highway system that hasn't changed for maybe 300 years. The only difference is we've got tarmac on the roads now, not mud. But the roads are in the same place. So we've got no new roads with the exception of one dual carriageway which takes people right across the top who just want to go through. The big problem is that the Forest Commission in the 1970s created this idea that it was really great that all these people who've now got a car could drive into the New Forest and experience nature and park right next to the trees and the ponies. So we have 150 free car parks in the New Forest. Free. Don't cost a penny. So what happens is people, we don't just get the car once, we get it loads of times because people come in, they park in one car park, go for a quick walk, get back in the car, go to another car park. So we have that car moving around the forest the whole time. The biggest and most important mission I'm on is to close all of those car parks, to create a barrier from the villages into the forest so that the only way you can get into the New Forest is by parking in our villages. which is the only place you can spend money. You cannot spend money on trees and ponies because it's free. And if we could create a situation where you had to take an electric people mover into the forest, which was run by a commoner who lived there, who could explain on the way what everything was, or even better still, hook up a pony to a trap made of wood in the New Forest, and again, have a host, that would be great. The big problem with that is, as soon as I mention any of these things, everyone go, you can't do that. So in terms of the situation at the moment, we have a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit. We have a 6-bus double-decker fleet called the New Forest Tour, where you're incentivized to go onto the bus, leave your car, spend the whole day connecting and disconnecting. But it's a tiny drop in the ocean in terms of the volume. The answer is, as I said earlier, there is no answer to congestion unless you do something pretty dramatic, like close roads. And today we have the technology to allow people who live in those areas to have a little sticker on their dashboard, which as they drive up to the gate, it just opens for them. But no one else can get through. And that would mean that we could manage those areas. The New Forest, I've mentioned, we have 13 million visitor days in an area of 90,000 hectares. It's an awful lot of people, and the physical erosion and damage is challenging. We're just about managing it, but it's on a and we need to do something drastic. And I, for one, am now free of the burden of having to be the policy supporter of the district council. And I have committed my next 5 years to say everything that I ever wanted to do without fear or favour, because the only thing that can happen to me is I can be sacked by the board of the community interest company. And that, to me, I don't think will happen, because the solutions are now important. We now have to find them. We can't prevaricate any longer. And the number of cars on the road is increasing every day. So I have no answers on real congestion, apart from very, very specific, powerful things like closing roads, closing car parks, creating new ways of access. One thing I would say is that in my experience, we have 200 miles of cycle track. And the cycling in the New Forest is a huge number of cyclists. It's safe cycling. It's not challenging cycling like here. It's just easy cycling. But you cycle amongst the animals. You cycle amongst the trees, the birds. But we have no peace because you can hear cars everywhere. So it's really important that if we do believe that we have this wonderful place, then we have to do something really special to tackle it. So for me, the only way of tackling it is severely. I don't think there are half measures. And already I can see in Reykjavík you've got some challenges with buses, and you've got minor problems compared to us, I assure you. No, I'm serious. They are really challenging. We have huge queues all over the place. You can't get through Lyndhurst on a Saturday. It's a real big problem. But what I would say is people won't change unless you do something very drastic in terms of either making it a really wonderful experience and giving them something they couldn't get in a car, or you make it so incredibly seamless that they don't notice. So I'm afraid I don't have any answers.
One question. He's changed that the council comes at more was going into, this community work and all of that. What is bringing on that change? What changed?
A guy called Boyd George, who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer in England, decided that the only way the British economy was going to cope was to cut local government funding by 40% in 4 years. And so councils all over the country had to make some pretty serious choices. And as this debate was unfolding, I saw an opportunity in terms of alignment, and I went to their council, the district council, and I said, I can save you £400,000 a year. I'll do this, I'll take your legacy, we'll carry on doing what we're doing, and you can have all of the benefit of your investment. You give us a little bit of money, which they are, to help us do it. And so you'll get what you want, it won't cost you money, and I get what I want, which is the freedom to work with the businesses in the community to really do the solutions I've learned about over the 30 years, and everyone's a winner. And it seems at the moment to be pretty satisfactory, and not only that, it's led to more, it's interesting, people are much more prone over the last couple of weeks to talk to me about ideas than they did the 30 years before, because I don't work for the council. Do you understand? They feel I'm more liberated, and therefore I can do things that I couldn't do if I worked for the council. So I'm very optimistic about the freshness that it'll bring to the local situation. I don't really think it now matters about the council, because they will have to support what goes on, unless we do things that are illegal. So I think we have a good paradigm which builds on what we had before and takes us on to a new beginning. And another little quote I got from an old man the other day who said, "A happy, successful life is one where there are more beginnings than endings." And I sort of like that. And it's another beginning. So in the fear and loathing of poor old Tom, I am reborn.
Could I just ask about this area? I haven't been before.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have brought some more photographs.
It's all right. Is it sort of physically possible to close it up and make it into an old-fashioned romantic area, and maybe inhabitants just have a bit past?
Yeah, I genuinely believe in that, and I know that a number of the landowners, one of the things, the New Forest is, just to give you a visual impression, it is, half of it is covered in trees, and half of it is open heathland. We have no big towns. The biggest town is 25,000. We have lots of small villages. We have sea along the bottom, and ultimately the core can be enclosed with a road that exists by just joining up a few bits. So we could put a road all the way around it, and they happen to coincide with the main towns and villages. So this is very possible. And the landowners, we have a lot of lords who own ancestral land that join on to the common land. It is very exciting, and there are 3 or 4 who I've worked with for a long time who may well, in the next couple of years, you know, because we have lots of other battles. We have housing. We have to take an extra 5,000 houses in 2 years' time, and another 5,000 houses 2 years after that. That's 10,000 houses. Well, where are we going to put these houses? So there are some big battles. We have congestion. We have ever increasing car ownership. If those houses, the pressure, the recreational pressure is going to be immense. So I believe that if we can be open about the discussion, people will realise that we have to take very drastic action. And and we've been practicing for a long time. So there are a lot of people who'd be prepared to help. And I am optimistic that we could. I have a saying that if you don't shoot for the moon, right, you don't even get halfway. And if you shoot halfway, you don't even get a quarter of the way. And if you shoot a quarter of the way, you hardly get off the ground. So you need to be for the big story. And I'm going to go for it. Yeah, and it is exciting. Yeah. Great. I think I've worn you all out. I've worn myself out. Thank you all very much.